Former New York Times executive editor Jill Abramson has a new book out. While Merchants of Truth has gotten good reviews, Abramson herself has been feeling the heat, accused of plagiarizing some 7 passages. Still, it hasn't stopped her from promoting a book she believes in. We sat down with her earlier this week. Merchants of Truth looks at the inside outs of 2 stalwarts, the New York Times and the Washington Post, and 2 one-time startups, BuzzFeed and Vice, and how the startups came out of the gate just at a time when the print industry was failing.
In the course of the 3.5 years I worked on it, it was like trading places, because now the Post and the Times are doing really well, and BuzzFeed and Vice are hurting.
Abramson takes a deep dive into the impetuous personalities and private picadillos of characters behind BuzzFeed and Vice. But for the most part, she is complimentary.
Vice, which went heavily into video a lot earlier than many other digital news companies. And they go, to sort of exotic and dangerous places that lots of other news correspondents don't think of going to or wouldn't dare go to. And, BuzzFeed doesn't really believe in all-powerful, all-knowing editors who decide what news is important.
Startups kind of come to their method of reporting and detailing what they know in a different way.
And with different standards.
Different standards. And are you okay with that?
I am okay with that, as long as, facts stay facts.
Abramson says BuzzFeed is very much plugged into what its audience wants, and she credits them with plunging ahead and printing the Steele dossier when no other media outlet would.
Some of it couldn't be verified, and, the rest of the media was very tentative about, doing stories on it.
As for the biggest financial mistake ever in the history of the New York Times, buying the Boston Globe for $1.1 billion in 1993.
It was one of the biggest write-downs in journalism.
The most successful journalistic stratagem in her lifetime? Clickbait.
It was pioneered by BuzzFeed, but quickly spread all over the media landscape.
Jill Abramson is upfront about her public firing from the Times in 2014, the only part of the book she writes in the first person.
I tell the story, which was obviously very painful, but was in some way connected to the broader issues that I examine in the book.
Did you see it coming?
I did not see it coming. I write about this, a negative job evaluation from the publisher, but then, he said I had, conquered the problems. And, what bothered me even about the evaluation was it was all centered on my moods and personality, and basically said nothing about journalistic accomplishments,
of which there are many. But even before the book was released, there were some questions about accuracy in her Merchants of Truth galley, and within days of publication, charges of plagiarism surfaced. Have you actually redone the book? Have you replaced those passages?
Well, I corrected everything in the e-book. The mistakes I made were completely inadvertent. Words were way too close to other sources that I should have footnoted at the very least. But, to say that I stole other people's work, I think is demonstrably not true.
Well, one of the writers, I think it was Jake Mullooly, who was really giving you pretty much of a hard time, saying, how did this happen, and how could you look at something, change a word or two, and not realize that you were working with somebody else's work?
I called Jake Mullooly personally to, apologize to him. And, it's his right to be very, very critical of me. But, I didn't I had no intention of stealing his work.
Do you think this has hurt you?
Oh, I think it's hurt me. It certainly has made me feel, really, sorry and bad. I've devoted, my career to integrity and the facts and the truth, and never ever, have thought about taking someone else's work and not crediting it.
What merchant of truth would? Well, Dan, you reviewed this book, and we've discussed the plagiarism charges here before. One of the problems is that it's not going away.
No.
And so the book has sort of been lost in this because, as a matter of, I give her credit for still going out on a book tour because she knows everybody's going to ask her about it. And actually, the book has some really interesting data and detail in there that I found brand new to me and I enjoyed, but it's been overshadowed.
It's a pretty good book. I gave it basically a favorable review in the Globe. I've admired her for a long time. I've said before I thought she got a raw deal at the New York Times. But it's very hard to overlook the plagiarism. This is one of the deadly sins. And you look at some of the interviews she's done, I'm not sure she quite understands what plagiarism is.
I think inadvertent. I don't know how that happens. I was doing a PowerPoint presentation the other night, and I was thinking, oh, I put this quote up there. I have to make sure that I say where the source was for this. If I'm thinking about that with a PowerPoint, I'm really scouring my book.
Yeah, listen, she's obviously being held accountable for her mistakes. I still don't quite understand exactly how they occurred, but people who consume media often accuse us of being a bunch of sharks. And when there's blood in the water, there's a feeding frenzy, well, that's what the journalism industry is like, too. And she's the latest blood in the water.
She has a fine, this all hangs on her reputation, which she had a strong one before. And I also was a defender of hers when she got booted out of the New York Times. But I do think that this latest stuff has just overshadowed the book. So a lot of people will not read the book even because it's supposed to be about truth, and they're put off by it. Also, I don't think that interview with Jake Mullooly did her any favors.
No.
I'm wondering if maybe we should have shown her what plagiarism is. Plagiarism, as defined.
Yeah. Well, and what would she have done to a journalist who had made those same mistakes?
Exactly.
All right, that is it for our show.